All right, guys, so we've got the plasma cut versions of our foam board cutouts. We ended up getting somebody to plasma cut these for us, but we did not get the slots in here, so we're still gonna have to do those, as well as we're gonna have to clean up the actual plasma cuts on these. So a little bit more work to do on it, but otherwise, at least we got the plates now. And so now let me show you what the plan is for the mounts. All right, so with the plates that attach to the Coyote, we're going to have those two bolted up there, think something like that. So this is the driver's side, this is the passenger side. And then on these, we're going to go ahead and have the angled fork on both, which actually captures the isolator. And that isolator part, the one that we tried to use with the original V6, but just is ultimately going to work out because they're just too large for our setup. These are going to have holes in it. I think we're going to go ahead and do 3 holes total, 2 in line, then 1 separate, so that way they cannot rotate. And so essentially that'll allow us to put in slots something like this, and then we put this guy on here with those 3 bolt holes there matched up, and that allows us to move this guy in this direction. Now on this one in particular, we're probably going to omit the 2 center bolt holes. You can see on the passenger side the mount's a little bit set up a little bit differently, so it doesn't really matter that we'd be able to remove those, but at least we'll have the movement here without the bolt heads of the actual mount plate interfering. That will require us to probably stand off this plate just a little bit to be able to get space. There's some webbings and some holes, etc., but to be able to hold that bolt to essentially keep this tight, we're definitely going to have to space that off a bit. So we might try and get off maybe 1/4 of an inch or something, and have to get a tool in to get that nut through and attached on those 3 bolts on the back. Same on this guy. So with that on there, then we have these bushings. Obviously I think most people know how a bushing or isolator works, but regardless, we've got a center tube here that's actually going to hold our 5/8 bolt. In the center of that, we've got isolators, and so there's material everywhere around this internal section that's holding on to the fork, and then the material is holding on essentially to this steel piece. This steel piece is going to go to the mount for the vehicle all the way down, and I'll kind of show you what the plan is there. Again, very similar to that Bronco version, but we got to essentially make it for this version. And then once this is assembled together, grease it up, some silicone or some lithium, and it essentially inserts in here. Once those 2 pieces meet together, you know, as you bring the engine in or you mock it up, you then throw in that 5/8 bolt, throw on a lock nut on the other side, and it's good to go. That's the plan for the mounts. Really nothing out of the ordinary there. That's how most everybody would do it for any kind of swap. We just ended up having to go with a little bit smaller isolators just to be able to clear our headers, clear everything else in there compared to that V6 and so forth. So that is the plan. Let's see what we can get done here. So one other thing to note here is we did decide to ultimately omit the holes that would be horizontal in here. That would allow us to essentially allow movement in the up and down direction or Z direction, in this direction and this direction. They would be locked in this in horizontal, so we wouldn't have to really worry about that, at least within a certain degree. But regardless, we decided to omit that. I think what the plan we're going to do now is just by spacing, much like that transmission bracket up, we're going to put spacers on the bottom of the other engine mount, the one that is attached to the actual isolator down here on a pedestal. Those are going to be moved up and down. That's going to get us that Z finesse that we need. I think with a little bit more robustness than what adding in the holes here. It's certainly a lot easier to make because we don't have a plasma cutter here at the shop, at least not yet. So at least that's the plan. Though that being said, it's still going to be kind of a pain to get these slots in here. We'll probably do the same method that we did on the transmission mount, drill a bunch of holes in line, and then run through with a angle grinder, a small angle grinder of some sort, and then oval them all out. So that's hopefully the plan there. Shouldn't be too bad. In essence, you can just do the 2 end holes to make the slot as well. But one way or another, we'll get it done. One last note here, we got our drawing finished up for the spacers for the transmission member I was just talking about. So we're going to go and get these sent out and plasma cut as well. Probably get 3 of these just in case out of the 1/4 inch, and then we'll probably give them some 16 gauge as well to cut from, so we can kind of vary that spacing just enough. I think we're going to need probably on the order of 1/4 to 3/8 is my guess. So we might just end up doing one of these and a couple of 16 gauges ultimately. But we'll go and get these cut here in the next couple of days and get them over and into the transmember. All right, so one quick update, guys. I think what we decided to do for the fork parts of the actual mount, so with the plate coming on the back here, instead of running with nuts, because those will obviously be pretty hard to get to with the angle of this thing, we're going to go ahead and run with a backing plate. So we know we'll just need about 1/4 of an inch or so of clearance from the other plate here, so that'll sandwich right about here. We're going to do the measurements here right now on time-lapse. Get 3 holes marked in here and then the slots into that other guy, but that'll essentially allow us to just have this plate in the back when we mount it, and then it'll always be able to move like that, and then you can just tighten down those two on the top, 1 on the bottom bolts, and yeah, it should be good to go. We might end up putting the 2 down here so it's a little bit easier to get to, but something like that. I think that's the plan now. Luckily these came with our kit. Alright guys, so we're going to go ahead and reproduce some of these heat shields for the bottom of the vehicle out of our other kind of corrugated aluminum that we got here for the same purpose. Would have loved to get the opposite one of these from the V6 model. Unfortunately, we can't really get them at this time of filming, so we're just going to go ahead and reproduce on both sides so they look identical, but otherwise this would be the number we would get. So. Alright guys, we're going to go ahead and start putting on our mounts now. We pretty much got the engine side done. I'm going to go ahead and take off the header and the AC so that we'll be able to access the mounts while they're in the Bronco easier from the front, so that we can weld them and then also put in the bolts once they're actually ready to go on the bottom side. So we've got the lower mounts in there already, ready to go. And yeah, so we'll go ahead and do the passenger side and the driver's side, get these adjustable horizontal mounts in, and then we're gonna go ahead and throw the motor into the car, get it positioned the same way we had it when we took measurements, and then we'll be in a position ready to do some measurements for the lower mounts and get those cut and get those tack welded in place. Once those are tack welded, we'll try and squeeze them out. If not, we'll take the motor out and then yeah, get those fully welded up. So that's the plan. All right guys, we are ready to throw in the Coyote powertrain and see about getting these lower mounts for the motor to the frame. We've got our plates already mocked in there. That'll be the base. And then as you just saw, we've got the upper mounts in both sides. So we're gonna go ahead and bring the motor in like we usually will, drop it in and get it leveled up in the same manner that we had it when we first took it out. After we had measured it. So we had already made equivalent points of interest and measured those to points on the motor, get the same angles, get the same distances on those. Once we're happy with that, we'll double check where the mounts are on the motor and on the car. And we will be able to tack weld on some pieces of metal once we get to see what kind of shape we ultimately need. I believe, at least kind of eyeballing it, these mounts shouldn't be very tall to where that plate is, so we should be pretty set on both sides. Sits very evenly. So let's go ahead and get it in there. We'll get the spacers in the back of the transmission, see how much we need, finish those up, and yeah, then we'll be pretty well solidified in the car. All right, guys, we got the motor back into the Bronco. Still resting on this front part. We're gonna go ahead and get these mounts installed, but first we need to go ahead and make sure all the angles are correct and all the distances are correct. I think I mentioned that already, but we're gonna go ahead and do that, time-lapse to get it all adjusted. Once it's there, we're gonna go ahead and cut out some pieces, do some measurements for the upright part of the lower mounts, get them test fit in there on both sides. We'll need about 4 probably, and then some stiffeners in the middle we'll probably add after we have them tacked in. Get them tacked in, pull everything out, get them welded up, everything's painted. I don't know if I mentioned, the nice part is the rear cross member for the transmission. Looks like we don't actually have to add any spacers, which is good because we didn't end up able to get the plasma cutter. It was down for those individual spacers, the thin and the thick ones, for the 10 or 80 mount. So anyway, we're gonna go ahead and get this all angled up, get it measured, and looking nice in the engine bay, get the engine mounts fabricated. And after that, we'll still have a little bit of play if we need to, because we'll be about in the middle of the 2 side mounts and that rear mount. So let's go ahead and do it. All right, guys, after much deliberation and coaxing, we have aligned the motor. It is right now jigged up perfectly, and it clears everything that we originally had issues with. So oil pan, headers, the steering column right here, this little sensor for the oil pressure sender, everything on the transfer case. All of that has at least 1/4 of an inch, more like 3/8 of an inch of clearance. The angle of the entire powertrain is about 3 to 4 degrees tail shaft down, about where you measure it. The closest one, which is the actual tail shaft, output shaft, the extension that attaches to the actual prop shaft, that to the frame is about 3 degrees exactly. So that's really good to see. The angle here is within 0.1 of a degree from the vehicle to the motor. So that is really good. We moved up you can see our shim stock here. We moved up the front. That's how we got the clearance that we ultimately did. We were still in line with the angles to and from, because we had some leeway and just, some slop in the measurements. And the only thing that I think we've done is it's slightly towards the passenger side, and I do mean very slightly. We wanted to do that a little bit to get us clearance here on the back of the valve cover. We may end up still clearancing that a little bit more, so we have well into 3/8 of an inch between that and the firewall itself. If we just take out some of that firewall material, I think we'll be exactly at 3/8 of an inch there. So it's about a 1/16 or so of an inch off center line. So the angle of the entire drive line exaggerated is about like that. But obviously it looks really, really good right now. We have all the clearance that we need to, like I said, on the headers, on the drive shaft, on the steering shaft, and on our sender. And we also think that, given that on these inline 4 vehicles, they divorced the ABS module versus the actual booster, whereas on the V6s it's all integrated in an electronic boosting system. So the lines unfortunately come right near here where the alternator would sit, and so we wanted to get a little bit more clearance. So we figured if we just moved it a little bit this way, we'd get that clearance. So once we get these lines nailed down against the actual frame and shock tower there, we should be sitting very, very well. So what we're going to go ahead and do now, we've got the mounts, you can see there. They're now tied down. They're bolted down. There's the other guy. It's a little bit harder to see right there. We've got those bolted in on their adjustable, the 3 bolts there. Those are centered, so we have space to move it even more if we need to, front and back. With those tied down, we've got the plates inside of their wells for the bottom mounts. Those are bolted down. What we're gonna go ahead and do now is take some relative measurements of that distance between the cylinder and the plates. We're probably going to end up with some kind of triangular pieces. Ultimately, we're going to probably aim for an H cross-section pattern. We'll put a stiffener there in the middle, but at least 2 triangular pieces that come up and meet with a round for that circular piece of steel that actually holds the isolator for these mounts. So that's the plan. We're going to go and use some shim stock real quick to fabricate up the plans for it. Once we have those shim stocks the way we like, they should be 4 unique ones. We will go ahead and trace those out onto steel, get them cut out of the steel, check them again with the steel fits. Then we'll start with tack welding in the backs, since that's how we'll access them, and then tack welding in the fronts, making sure they're as level as we can be. Obviously, once they're tack welded in, then we got to rip everything out, finish welding up those mounts, get everything painted, and we're good to go. So let's do it. All right, guys, so we got a special event here. We've got a beautiful 2.7 4-door 2021. It might be a 2022 Bronco. This is a wild track version. Anyway, we wanted to get one of our buddies over here who owns this to do some part checks for a few things here in the engine bay and down below in the car. So the shroud for our PCM, the ABS, which is just so much nicer on the V6 versions. Honestly, I wish we had a V6. Unfortunately, just with the shortage, we couldn't get one in time. But ultimately, the nice part is we'll be able to do the swap easily on both inline 4 V6 or the 2-door 4-door. So that's really nice to see. So, or anything else that they come out with for that matter. There honestly is quite a lot of space in these cars. So yeah, we're just getting some part numbers, looking how the exhaust is routed on the bottom, any kind of peculiarities, since the V6 is similar in certain regards to a V8 for laying things out logistically. Other than that, yeah, this is a really sweet car. We expect to use this one kind of as a comparison vehicle when we get ours done with. And yeah, really beautiful. Like I said, wild track, plenty of nice. This, in fact, also has the technology suite in it. So definitely some intriguing stuff. I want to say that we've already looked, and we have some plans for maybe doing some additional work on a V6 version and perhaps a manual version, but I'll leave that as a teaser for more to come. Anyway, so let's get back to our build here. All right, guys, we got the mounts for the Coyote all fabbed up. Just got them done painting, and they're looking pretty good. Very, very beefy. We got 1/4-inch wall all around, as well as the grease fitting that we just put in for some silicone grease for our polyurethane bushing. So what we're going to go ahead and do now is we're going to throw them into the mounts on the lower side, and then put in the motor and see how everything lines up. And hopefully everything should be exactly how we originally rigged it up. So let's go verify that. But first, we're going to go ahead and throw in the remainder of the isolators and the center bushing so that we can get that all mounted up onto those upper control arms. Let's go ahead and do it. All right, guys, we got the motor mounts in. The entire Coyote 5.0 liter Ford motor is upright completely on its own inside of the 2021 Bronco that we have here. So we took a little while getting the mounts just exactly the way we wanted to. There's some adjustability built into both the upper mount and the lower mounts. So if you guys go back, you can see how we did that. But ultimately, with that adjustability, we're able to fine-tune all the close points that we ultimately had with this motor, which in reality, there's not many. So we had the close points in relation to the headers that we had, both on the frame and on the steering column. We have the oil sender unit a little close to the steering rack electronic box. And then, of course, the oil pan clearance to the differential tube and the actual valve cover to the back of the motor. So we got the motor right now completely leveled in almost every direction that we needed to. So where it's not level, it's in our favor in essence. So we've got in this direction angle, it's perfectly 0 degrees with the frame. Towards the back, we're at a slope of about 3 to 4 degrees, which is standard for most powertrains and what the original motor we had in here was already at. And then we have the positioning of the motor with relation to the vehicle itself. So ours is canted a little bit towards the passenger side, only by about 1/16 of an inch or so front to back. That's just to get us a little bit extra clearance on that driver's side next to the steering column, as well as near the oil sender. Other than that, the position front to back in the vehicle, the motor is probably about 3.5 to 4 inches back further than the original inline 4 or V6 powertrains in these cars. And so the weight distribution is going to be fantastic when we look at that. In addition, the entire engine for the Coyote here should be a little bit lower in center of gravity than on the inline 4 and the V6. So we're really excited about that as well. Otherwise, positioning in the tunnel left and right is pretty much the same as well. Everything else almost identical. So between the trans mount that we built and these two engine mounts, we are fully set. Now that we've know that these are going to fit, we're going to just tweak a few things on the adjustment for it in terms of the bolts and how they attach and everything. And then we're going to go ahead, since we've already painted out the bottom lower mounts, we're going to go ahead and paint the upper mounts as well. Make sure everything is fixed fixed in terms of location and so forth in the vehicle. Once that's all solidified, get everything painted, and then the motor is in the car, and we're only worried about the electronics and throwing on some of the accessories, making sure the wiring loom, etc., fits around the motor. So that's the next step. But right now, I think we're going to go ahead and call it a day. Remember to like, comment, subscribe. So we've got a brand new 5-liter Coyote inside of this 6th generation Bronco. First that we've ever seen on a street vehicle. We're really excited to show you guys what this thing is capable of on the road once we get it out. And we have tons more surprises for you guys. So remember to stay tuned, check on our future content, hit that notification button, because we're going to have some seriously cool stuff coming, not just on this vehicle, but on all of our other projects as well. So we'll catch you guys later. Have a good one, Faction.
Can you do that again? You suck.